Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our 2021 Crop Tour results webinar. We're so excited to show you the results from the diligent work our team did over the past couple of weeks to analyze crop results throughout Iowa and Minnesota. So to kick things off, I'm going to pass this over to Matt Karstens, Landus President and CEO, who will tee up the rest of the webinar.
Excellent, Andrea. Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone, for the second annual Landus Crop Tour Results Webinar. We're happy that you're able to join us today, especially for our farmer owners who we do this predominantly for. I want to first, though, thank all of the folks at Landus that spent their time making this happen, from our account managers to relationship specialists, our grain team, on down the line. There was a lot of people that poured a lot of time, heart, and soul into these results, and we're excited to share them with you today. I also want to say a special thanks to Stacy Rash and Reese Strength, who led this initiative and made this all come to fruition today. The tour itself covered 36 counties, 255 townships, and 510 fields, which is a lot of coverage. And it's exciting to be able to show you the results from this, because for you, our farmer owners, it's an important lead into this harvest relative to what you can expect and what you may need to do from adjustments of your marketing program or just overall logistics and storage from your standpoint. For us as Landus, the company you own as a cooperative, we do the same thing. And what does our logistics need to be? The storage on down the line that are decisions we need to make sure that when you bring us your grain, that we're able to handle it at the speed and space that you've come to know and trust here at Landus. As we say all the time at Landus, grain is our #1 business. We've got to get that business right. And it starts ahead of our fall season with this event. So a big thanks again to everyone and helping deliver these results and share these exciting outcomes with all of you. I'm also pleased to welcome our optimization partner, NuWay K&H, that covers just into the Minnesota market, helping us not only analyze what's going on in their market and some of the cause and effects that we see into the southern Minnesota market, how that affects our Iowa, particularly northern Iowa market. For us specifically here at Landus, particularly the drawback that can be into the Rake, Thompson, and Britt market. So a big thanks to them for joining. Glad they were a part of the journey and a part of the opportunity to be involved in this year and helping us expand that reach and better information as well. So I hope you find value in today's presentation. This is all about you, our farmer owners. Although we have a wider audience than that today, this is why you have a cooperative, to help provide the insights and lean into what's coming around the corner. In some cases, just in a few days or weeks. For others, it may be a little longer than that. But it's important that we have that journey. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to one of our account managers, J.W. Thomas. J.W., the floor is yours. Thanks again, everyone, for being a part of this today.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I'm going to talk a little bit about the methodology. My name is J.W. Thomas. I'm our account manager in our Perry facility. So I'm going to get into kind of how we went about taking these samples and what went into calculating our yield projections. So as you can see, we took samples from 36 counties and 255 townships throughout our trade area. The protocol we used to determine which fields we would take samples from, we tried to be within a 12-mile radius of one of our current grain facilities. On the soybean side, here's the methodology we used. First, we determined the fields within the township. We wanted some space between them so that we weren't selecting fields that maybe shared a fence line. We wanted to be more representative of the whole township. We first got in the field. We took a stand count to identify how many plants per acre were out there, or a population. We identified the stage to determine how far along those beans were. And then where we took our stand counts, we pulled the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 12th, and 15th plant to give us a representative sample throughout that population count, or that stand count. We pulled off all the leaves, we counted the pods, and then counted each bean on the plant, and then that is what we plugged in to our calculation to determine our projected yield. On corn, similar, very similar strategy here. We selected 2 fields within the township. We wanted them to have some distance between them. Again, did not want them to share a fence line. Came in, did a stand count to determine our population, did a stage. We identified the crop stage, and then we pulled ears 7, 17, and 21 within that stand count the row where we took the stand count. We counted kernels around and kernels long, and that's what we plugged in to our calculation on projected yield for corn. For the results, I'm going to turn it over to Zach Minahan, and him and I are going to kind of tag team the results for the Southwest region.
Can you hear me?
You bet.
Okay, so yeah, let's see here. I don't have control of the slide here, so I was going to slide over to the next one. There we go. So yeah, as you can see, fairly good numbers coming in for corn here. The south of here, Greene County's probably, that's where I'm based out of, is Jefferson. So we're more than likely probably going to see right around that 200 mark. And then south into Guthrie, down to Adair, Cass counties. Big thing on corn this year, what we've seen is just the timing of some of the rains we got. It is overall pretty dry, but when those rains came, they were pretty critical time frames in our corn growing stages. But overall, some good numbers that we're seeing out here too. Obviously, we've got to finish this crop out. But as far as the corn, very little tip back, very, great stand counts, a lot of 16, 18, around 35 to 40 long, and that's what we want to see. JW, you have anything else to touch on in that for corn?
I completely agree. I think the story this year for the improved yields that you see on the screen over last year is just the amount of rainfall and the timeliness of that. We were in some pretty critical times there throughout the growing season, and it just seems like we caught a rain right in the nick of time. So no, that's what I've got.
Yep, and I think too, what we counted, our stand counts were on, and talking to the guys' field that we were in, or growers' field that we were in, dropped the planter at 35, and we were at 34 and a half, or right at 35 or 36. The stand counts are as good as I've ever seen in the area that I cover and work with too. So we want to slide over to beans here. Beans, again, you can kind of trace this rainfall line as we go south, maybe a Carroll and Greene. I know Crawford County, looking maybe north side of Crawford County, they're having a severe white mold issue and some other stress factors up there. Greene County, I think, may be a little high, but the pods are there. What we saw and what we counted, the pods are there. We just need to put some beans in the top half of that, top third of that canopy. But again, you can kind of tell down to Guthrie, Cass, Adair, similar rainfall and timing on them too. So we've seen some rain here in the last 10 days too that'll help us finish these beans out. But some of these beans are really starting to yellow up fast and kind of turn, and round third head for home really here in the 1st of September.
Thanks, JW and Zach. Hi, I'm Connor Kuhlmeyer, account manager, Altoona Bondurant. If for those of you that don't know where Altoona Bondurant is, I'm basically sitting east and northeast of Des Moines. So some stuff that we kind of went into the season. A lot of guys were kind of maybe thinking about pushing the clock, planting early. Some guys decided to do that. Some guys decided to not. I don't know if there's really been a difference, I guess, in yield from what I've seen. As far as that goes, obviously the combines will tell the truth. Basically, from what I've seen too, some of the stuff that was planted early or just general in season, we didn't have much rain like the fellows before me said. So from what I saw is there's a pretty wide variance of stand counts in corn. I think I counted anywhere from 28 to 34. So it kind of contradicts what the guys previous have been seeing as well. For the most part, as you can see in some of my pictures here, the corn is filled to the tip. I did see did find a couple fields for whatever reason were tipped back pretty hard. I'm not necessarily sure what the situation with that was, but generally stuff filled to the tip pretty nice. A lot of times in my stand counts, I took 3 ears. One might be 14, one might be 16, and one might be 18. So I don't know, a little bit of inconsistency there, and I think some of that might come down to the emergence deal as well. Brendan covers Collins area and up there. We were kind of talking on corn as far as that goes, and the ears look good as they are right now, but some of the kernels are a little shallow. So our test weights down in this area might be lagging a little bit, I guess, come here shortly. The middle picture, I was pretty impressed with that ear. That tested out at 305, which was my biggest. I think my smallest was like 160. So the variance there, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Top right picture, I did find quite a bit of disease in the corn. This field was even rotated. So we'll get a true test to see if the fungicide held off some of that disease here pretty soon as well. Corn rootworm pressure. Corn rootworm pressure in corn was quite bad this year, and I'm sure some other account managers are going to touch on that here later in the presentation, so I won't spend much time on that, but pretty bad. A lot of pretty much put in bugged open with every fungicide pass we made. For the results part on the corn, for quadrants, I guess. So next slide. What I saw is, so I primarily pulled out of Polk County, and then a little bit out of Jasper too. Brennan pulled out of the Story, Marshall counties. Polk County, I feel like as you work northern Polk, the yields got a little bit better. Down towards southern Polk, I think they just missed out on some rain that we got, I guess. I think that's what we're going to see this year. And I think you can kind of see that in the picture based off of, even further north than that from what Brennan found. So on the soybean side of things, I saw quite a bit of sudden death syndrome in fields, and I know Brennan had quite a bit of that up there, even whole fields. I think the weather was just kind of perfect for that. I know we think that, well, we weren't very wet, but it was just kind of the perfect storm this year. When I did pull a lot of my soybean samples, the guys talk about measuring how many stand count and stuff like that. I had a heck of a time. I'm not a very tall guy. I had a heck of a time walking through the beans because they're pretty lodged already. So maybe look for maybe quite a few lodged soybeans in this area here come fall. When I tested a lot of the pods, the plants had a lot of pods. Most of them just had 2 beans in them. With the third potential sitting there, you could feel it in there and just wasn't really there. I will note, after I did my yield test, we did get about 1 inch rain the next week, and since then I've been out in some of the fields, not necessarily the fields that I took samples on, but that third bean has kind of filled out a little bit better now. So I do expect maybe these yields to be maybe a touch better. So I guess time will tell. I'm going to pass it over to Bruce Ballvance and Jeff Arneson.
Hi, I'm Bruce Ballvance, account manager in Bradford, part of E2. I covered the counties of Franklin, Hardin, a little bit of Wright. I also do some work in the Butler and Bramer areas that I'll go over today too. Our findings in this area was lots of variability in rainfall. Butler and Bramer counties had timely rains throughout the growing season. Lately here, this last weekend, Butler and Bramer counties suffered some significant wind events after our crop tour. We're talking corn flat clean from Clarksville all the way into Tripola and Sumner, so it's a pretty wide area. Beans did suffer too. It's all going to depend if the farmers can pick that corn up this fall on some of that. But as far as the yields in that area is doing exceptionally well because of the timely rainfall. Franklin and Hardin counties, a lot of fields in this area had half the normal rainfall for the year. So we're seeing a lot of droughtier looking stuff in the Franklin and Hardin County areas. So in the cornfields, some of the things that we were seeing in the Franklin and Hardin County areas is a lot of tip back due to the dry conditions. We got a lot of shallow kernel depth, which is of course due to the dry conditions, which could cause a test weight problem. We're hoping these late rains have helped bring that test weight back, but we'll see it this fall. We've had a lot of high rootworm pressure on corn, which we're probably going to see 20 bushel hit probably in a lot of fields, if not more, just by the rootworm pressure. We did see a lot of stand counts, probably a little off than normal due to the dry planting conditions this spring. As far as beans, pod counts were pretty low. There was a lot of 2 beans per pod. We feel though that the late rains will help the beans develop that 3rd bean in the pod, so our bean yields could improve before fall. We have a lot of soil types that are showing up now. Of course, the lighter soil types are dying off a little bit premature. So, Jeff, I would like to hand it off to you if you can finish us out here.
Great. So, a little recap for us up north. We started out early and we were really warm and dry. So then all of a sudden we had the switch hit and we turned cool and dry. We had our last frost May 25th. Then it went to hot and very dry. So a lot of corn that got planted was planted in dry dirt, and it ended up, I'd guess, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 plants that either didn't come up or they came up and they're barren. When I was doing my stand counts, it's just, it was too much for it to overcome. As stands look better than what they are when you get actually out into the field. Because of the frost, we had a fair amount of beans that had to be replanted. Since May 1st, we've had over 2,300 growing degree units. That's 200 more than the 30-year average. And with 5 to 8 inches of rain last week, we're still 8 inches short of the 30-year average, which is in this area is 20 inches. That's reported at Waseca, which is a research station just north of here, about 25 miles. Corn on corn acres were hurt by corn rootworms, just like most of the rest of the area. Corn's down, tipped. So we probably are going to have a slight shift in our rotation going next year. These guys are going to try and get ahead of it again. Our troublemaker, woolly cup grass, it reared its ugly head again this year. So we're going to have some extensive weed pressure to try and overcome over the next couple of years. We caught some scattered rains. Corn and soybeans both came up. They looked very good. In other areas where we missed the rains, stands are spotty. The later coming years are tipped back, and in the beans, the pods were still flat when I did my check. Now, we've had quite a bit of rain since that time. I expected a lot of the flat pods will fill. The beans were there. Every field, they were still blooming when I did my check. So I think going forward, we do have potential above and beyond what our bean results are showing here. If we don't get another early frost to finish off our crazy year. The best part of my tour, which surprised me a little bit, is that our corn crop is better than what I thought. There's a lot of, like the rest of the guys saying, 14, 16, 18 row around, but the smaller the rows around, seems like the longer the ear. I had a lot of them that were 36 to 40 kernels. This moisture is helping fill. It's going to improve the test weight and the grain quality come harvest time. And I guess if the beans that were blooming will set pods, we're going to be at least this good and maybe even 4 or 5 bushels better. So with that, I guess I'll pass it off to Dave Lemke. And Dave, I'll let you talk.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, I'm Dave Lemke. I am an account manager in the Northwest area of Landus. I was partnered with Stacy Rash, our grain advisor in the Western area. And 2 weeks ago when we were out in these fields, they didn't look as good as they do today. But kind of a recap, starting with corn. Just like the rest of the northern area of our trade territory, like Bruce and Jeff experienced, we had very sporadic emergence, I'll call it, corn that laid in dry dirt because of field cultivator ridges, tractor tracks, whatever. And so our emergence wasn't real even. But today it looks much better than I'd anticipated back 4 months ago. Consistent stand is one thing that's different this year than past years. This flat area where we hold more water and are normally wet more than dry, all of the low ground is full of plants. Very good, healthy ears. Some of the things that we experienced will kind of tell us what the tail is. Earlier varieties that were filling when we were running out of water and had very little to go on are going to have shallower kernel depth than some of the late ones. We began getting rain here again 2 weeks ago, and it's made a huge difference in our corn fill on the late varieties. We're about 3/4 milk line now on the early varieties. Some are getting very close to black layer. Some of the fuller season are at 1/3 milk line. So they still will add some weight. Other things we experience, like the rest of our territory, corn rutworm feeding in our corn on corn. You know, we have a lot of beetles still in these fields. Some that we bug bombed, you know, there are going to be some egg layers out there yet. We've had very few issues as far as disease, even though I believe our fungicides with their improving plant health are going to pay big dividends this year. Same kind of weed pressure, you know, the ever-present water hemp. Wherever there's a little hole where it can get a little sunlight, you're going to find a little water hemp. Woolly cupgrass, like Jeff mentioned. It's been years since we've seen it sneak through. I think some of our pre-plant products and the late rains allowed them to sneak through, and it only takes them 3 weeks to go from emergence to dropping seed. Hailed on fields over west. We had a belt that had a lot of hail, middle part of June. I'm amazed at the resilience of a corn plant, because there's going to be some 240 bushel corn that at one time looked like maybe it should have been in consideration to replant. We'll switch to soybeans now. In our area, you know, just like the rest of the north, cool start. We had good populations. You know, it just took them a while to get going. 2 weeks ago, when we thought we were starting to senesce, drop leaves, shut down, we got a good rain, and it's amazing how those plants have recovered. We are going to have very good sized soybeans. It's good for seed production. It's good for our green people. It's good for the yield because it can improve our yield as much as 20%. At the same time, we also began noticing white mold. And it's been many years since I've seen this much white mold occur. And we got to think back, we had a perfect storm in some areas where we had a couple of nice rains, rained off and on for 4 or 5 days, picked up 3-4 inches, then it stayed humid down in that canopy. Just when that plant was blooming or finishing up blooming, that's when the little mushrooms, the sclerotia from this white mold, were putting spores into the canopy. So it infects the bean, and at the period where we're at today, where it's heavy into reproduction, and the past 2 weeks, it shuts off the supply of nutrients and the plant dies. So it's going to be a problem in future years on these same acres. You know, we keep looking at how can we get better variety selection, and there's a couple of products, Contans and Heads Up, that we've looked at in the past that probably have some value looking forward. Looking to next year, the recent rains are a godsend. We're reloading our soil. We'll make it easier tillage, putting fall ammonia on, and planning ahead to next year's crop. With that said, I'll pass it off to Stacy Rash.
Morning, everyone. It's kind of hard to follow Dave, but you know, just kind of going over some of the yield results. Dave and I and a couple other guys, we rode around and did the crop samples. We did 36 just an item sack, or excuse me, yeah, I believe 36 times 2. We saw a wide variety of crop out there when it came to the stages and what it looked like as far as yield. The big thing comes down to your soil. The clay soil, which is more south of 175 around that Ida and Sac area, really had held the moisture well. They caught a really good rain right in the beginning of July, that just kind of saved that plant and was able to put on some good ears. So as you can see, on the high side, we were seeing 230s, 250s. But on the low side, you would see, you know, in the 150s, and a lot of that was probably based on where the widespread hail came from and the soil conditions, along with the moisture. If they caught rain at the right time in July to help with pollination and stuff. So, like I said, we saw a wide variety all over the place, and based on kind of following the drought map, like BV County, they've kind of missed some of the timely rains or just got a little bit less than what we did in certain areas. Calhoun County, they just have that heavy soil. They tend to have a lot of ponding this year because they caught a few more rains than what we did. They have that heavier soil that holds the moisture better. On the low side in Calhoun County, you're probably looking at some river bottom. So if you want to move over to soybeans. On the soybean side, again, we saw a lot of variety, kind of based on what kind of soil, who caught the rain. But the other thing that we're really starting to see take effect, and it's really starting to get shocking, is the fact that the white mold is taking over. When we first noticed it, we noticed it on the south of 175, kind of around that Sac and Calhoun area, where we have the clay soil. We caught those rains in July. That's where it first 2 weeks ago, it was probably about a month ago, you started noticing it. 2 weeks ago, you were starting to see it heavy, and now we're starting to see it overtake some fields where there's a real chance that those fields might, you know, 2 weeks ago probably looked like they could have been 50 bushel beans and now might only be 20 bushel beans. And we're seeing it spread throughout the Northwest, along with some sudden deaths. Like Jeff said, it was kind of a perfect storm. We caught the rains, heavy dews, humidity at the right time, and those spores came in and have kind of been taking over it. But with that being said, we did see some, with this rain that we've had, I really think when we were doing these pod counts back 2 weeks ago, the top part of the plant wasn't necessarily filled, or there were 3 bean pods, but only 2 of them were really filled and just kind of a BB on the end. That's changed a lot. I went out in the field and looked at some the other day, and definitely the plants are looking a lot better. The beans are looking a lot more filled out. The biggest thing I guess I should mention on both the corn and beans, not yesterday, but the night before, we had heavy storms come through. We're starting to see some green snaps show up in our cornfields from all the different winds that we caught. Have some down corn that's pretty bad. That's going to be really frustrating to combine kind of on the south side of Odebolt, through Kyron, through Crawford County, down through Breda and stuff into Carroll County. So there's some frustration with that as we get so close to the harvest, but I will pass this off to Jeff, one of our optimization partners at NuWay K&H. Excited to hear what they have to say. Glad you're here, and they will be giving us some information on the Minnesota area.
I'm Kevin Anderson. I'm the FarmRx site-specific Ag Director, Precision Ag Manager for NuWay K&H. What we saw this year in our crop tour, and by the way, thank you for letting us participate in the crop tour. This is the first time we've done this, so we don't have the history that some of the other counties might have, but we hope to grow this. I think it's a good thing. The results that we're looking at on the corn side, we're seeing quite a bit of tip back. We've had some issues with the rootworm and the beetles, and been a little bit of an issue. Had some spray. We're about 40% corn on corn, maybe 35% corn on corn, and we've been seeing declining results of our yields in corn on corn the last couple of years. Perfect. I'm gonna let Jeff continue with some of the disease issues and some of the things we saw here this year.
I'm Jeff Krissinger, Vice President of Sales and Marketing for NuWay K&H Agronomy. Been with the company for 26 years. Really pleased to be able to be part of this crop tour that Landus is putting on, and I thank them for the opportunity to be a part of that. We were the first optimization partner when optimization was announced, and that's been very successful so far. Seeing a lot of opportunity within this relationship with Landus, and looking forward to continuing the working relationship that we've started to build here. So I'll just kind of give you a quick overview here of some of the factors that affected the yield numbers that Kevin's going to show you. It's going to sound a lot like the Northwest Quadrant, although I would say even as you go north to the state line between Minnesota and Iowa, it gets even drier. So our southern territory is exceptionally dry. And then as you start moving north through that and get a couple counties into Minnesota moving north, we get an area there where the rain picked up a little bit, and I think you'll see that in our results. But as far as starting out the season and the season as a whole, it's been a great year for us to get work done. It never seems to rain, so we got planted very early. We're able to continuously plant through the process, both corn and soybeans. At the time, it was cool and dry, similar to what Jeff Aronson referenced before. That did cause, in a similar fashion, some stand loss and some variability in stand when it comes to corn. We had some cases where we lost probably up to 20% of our stand, and certain lot numbers of certain hybrids, maybe even a little bit more than that. So we have seen some stand loss because of the planting conditions, planting in dry dirt, as mentioned before, and just the cool conditions that kind of slowed the emergence process. Because of that, also had some uneven emergence, which gives us the barren stalks and decreases our harvestable ear count. So even though we got off to a great start, got things in what we thought were really ideal soil conditions, just the cool, dry weather for an extended period of time kind of affected our stand to start off with.
moving on then, we had some pretty good subsoil moisture coming into the season, and really that got us through up until almost pollination time, where we would see some stress, but not severe stress. So really we were getting through, having pretty decent growth once it turned warm. Actually a little faster growth than what you would normally see. But as we went through the season with no rain, it can just continue to get drier and drier. I think Kevin Anderson has a number, or had a number, that we got about 4 to 5 inches of rain between planting date, or April 1st through August 1st, or April 15th through August 1st. So not a lot of rain to work with, but the subsoil kept us moving there pretty well. It was dry enough that we started to see some nitrogen deficiencies around side dress time. We're thinking that customers that side dress nitrogen hopefully avoided some of that stress. We do a fair amount of Y dropping up here, so trying to get that nitrogen as close to the plant as we can, and hopefully that helped some nitrogen uptake when the soil was too dry to move it naturally. Also saw some potassium deficiencies there in corn, something we don't typically see a whole lot, but again, dry conditions cause those. Getting into pollination time then, we do have significant corn rootworm pressure here. In corn, we are seeing that problem continue to increase. Saw a huge increase last year in pressure, namely in corn on corn or continuous corn fields, where we had significant silk clipping and root damage. We saw that again this year, again, a perfect environment for corn rootworm up here because of lack of rainfall and just really good conditions for corn rootworm to reproduce. So have a fair amount of corn rootworm pressure in corn on corn, and we are starting to see it in first year corn again up here. So definitely a big management factor as we go into 2023. We had some fields in some cases where we know that they're either continuous corn or will be corn on corn again, where we actually had to spray beetles at pollination or shortly thereafter when we put fungicide on, and then again 2 to 3 weeks after that. So some fields got sprayed twice. So that kind of gives you an indication of the pressure that we're starting to see up here. Again, around pollination time is really when we started to see our drought stress in corn. We've got great rows around on our corn in most cases, 16, 18, 20 rows around, but after pollination started to see significant tip back, especially in our corn on corn acres, again, seeing a bigger hit in those acres, of course. So tip back, we are seeing shallow kernels because of lack of rainfall where they couldn't fill. That's obviously going to affect yield. And then because of some of the variability from spring and then the drought conditions, we're going to see some really significant moisture swings as we go through harvest. 10-point moisture swing isn't going to be uncommon. So grain quality has a good chance to be reduced, and storage life may be shortened. With that, we did get some rain here, so we got about 5 inches of rain in the last week or so. We're hoping that helps some of our later hybrids. We typically run from roughly 98 to 100-day maturity here to up in that 110, maybe a little longer day. So we're hoping that some of those late rains are helping some of our later hybrid corn, and I think they will from a grain fill standpoint. As far as harvest goes, there was actually some really early corn that was taken out yesterday. That would be the first corn combine that I know of. But really, we're probably looking at mid-month. We're going through some black layer on the earlier maturities now or within the next week. So roughly mid-month, we expect corn harvest to start ramping up, and then probably have a good 7 to 10 days before we see bean harvest there. So that's kind of the corn summary. I'll move into beans. Similar thing. Our growers were extremely aggressive in planting soybeans early this year. A lot of soybeans were going in at the same time as corn, or some customers even chose to wait to plant corn because of those dry conditions and put beans in the ground instead. So very, very aggressive bean planting early. The extended growing season has given us a fair amount of growth to the point where we're seeing more lodging probably in beans and certain varieties than we have before, which can affect yield there. Not extreme, but definitely noticeable. Throughout the season, we saw some significant iron chlorosis effects. We get into some pretty high pH areas up here in that 7.5, 8, even a little above 8 range up here. So saw a lot of fields that had significant iron chlorosis. It was easy to pick out the fields where maybe soybean placement wasn't what it should have been, and that's going to affect our overall yield. We did have pretty good recovery on it, so not as dramatic as what it looked mid-season, but definitely a factor. Again, because of drought, nutrient deficiencies were showing up regularly, especially potassium in soybeans, which we've tried to fix some of that foliarly. Don't know how effective that'll be with it being dry and trying to get absorption into the plant, but with the deficiencies we were seeing, we felt it was worth a try to get that done. Later on, within the last 3 weeks or so, saw some pretty heavy spider mite infestations. Again, with drought conditions, spider mites have a tendency to flare up. So 3 to 4 weeks ago, spraying some pretty good spider mite infestations. Probably didn't spray as many acres as what we maybe should have, but with what the drought was looking like at the time, understandable that some growers decided that they didn't want to make that investment, because most of it would have had to be done by airplane because of our large growth and some of the lodging we were seeing. Harvest for beans, we started turning some of our earlier maturities pretty good around the 20th of August or so. So expecting right around the 20th of September to be when we really start getting into beans and seeing what those yields are there. So that's kind of a summary of what we saw during the season. So I'll hand it back to Kevin Anderson to go a little more in depth into some of the results that we had.
Yeah, so looking at some of our corn results, I know that maybe a lot of the people on this webinar aren't familiar with the yields that we get in southern Minnesota. Right now we're trending at about a 30 bushel below average yields at what those numbers are there. So our normal corn yield is in that 210 to 220 range. One of the things that I mentioned earlier that we've been seeing is a hit with our corn on corn acres versus corn on soybean rotation. And where we used to figure 5% loss, now we're thinking the last 2 years especially, we're seeing a larger loss, whether that's due to insect pressures or nitrogen management or weather. You know, talking about weather and how dry it was, we did have some, like I believe it was Jeff Arneson said they had some frost damage. We did see some stand reduction on fields with high residue, where the soils just didn't warm up, and we had a lengthy time where that seed sat in the soil and did not get emerged as quickly, and more uneven emergence. Just to give you an example, our corn on beans, so we sampled 27 fields for corn, and out of those 27, 14 were rotated corn and soybeans, and 13 were rotated or were corn on corn, and we had a 17 bushel difference between those just in this crop tour results. Last year, our data with our data link growers, we had a 19 bushel difference between corn on corn and corn on soybeans. So we're trending there again, which concerns me a little bit, that we need to maybe change some management practices in our corn on corn, whether it's the traits or nitrogen or the timing, planting timing. We'll have to look at all of those. Variability is huge in our area. As you can see, Jeff mentioned that we had some rain go through. I'm looking back at some late May and early June rains that we got in northern Martin County and southern Wantagh County that we did not get in southern Martin or Jackson County. And that's explaining some of the variability there, because I believe that would have helped with some pollination issues. We pollinated, tassels came out around that 4th of July to the 15th of July time frame. We had a really tight planting window, so stuff came to tassel pretty consistent as far as timing there. I'd say within that 10 days, everything went from non-tasseled to tasseled. But we did see in the crop tour, we saw a lot of plants without ears, and obviously those weren't counted in our stands, so we did have a little bit of loss there in our corn. One thing that we're doing for our growers, so we did a 12-mile radius of Trimont. Trimonts are NuWay agronomy headquarters, we do not have grain, so we could not go from a grain facility. So we just chose Trimont. And so we sampled those townships within that 12-mile radius. Within that 12-mile radius from north to south, like I said, we had high variability, but even within the fields, we see such high variability from soil structures. We took drone flights of every field that we sampled for corn and got a tassel count off of those. And we'll take the averages of the field, of the kernel counts, and take those back to that drone flight. And each of our growers that we sampled a field for will get results back on the variability within the field, not necessarily only the variability within the county. So we're looking at nitrogen and applied side dress, like Jeff said. We'll take that to yield to see if that had a factor or not. I believe it's going to, just by looking at ear length, fill, and just the overall plant health. One thing that I would encourage every grower to do, if they haven't with their account manager, is to go out and check fields and do push tests. Jeff and I are actually going to go fly a couple fields here after this meeting. We had some wind damage to the north of our territory, and we're getting a couple calls, some guys that want to get out and look in the middle of their fields thinking they might have some wind damage from last weekend's storm. So we're going to go see what we can see there. On the soybean side, again, the yield results, it's really hard to count, in my opinion, yield on soybeans. Like Dave Lemke said, the 20% increase from this rain last weekend, the 5 inches, and I believe that could happen, and it all happens on that top third of that plant. So a lot of the pods that we were counting were originally, or had a third small BB bean in it, and hopefully that takes off and gets us to that next level. So a 50 bushel crop could turn into a 60 bushel crop, and that would be excellent. Our average yields usually are around that 60 to 65 bushels for beans in this area. One of the things that we saw looking through was some tangled, a lot of tangled up beans, hard to get through, hard to walk through, depending on the variety. I think growers need to pay attention to the different size of the beans that they're buying and wanting to plant, and how bushy or tall they're getting to fit the soils that they have. Iron chlorosis reared its ugly head at us this year with the dry weather. We were able to pick those spots. We're trying some different iron products in known iron chlorosis areas to see if that helps, and we'll have those results after harvest as well. Jeff said we had an early planting season. Our average date of our data link group for planting was April 22nd. That means that half the beans in that group, which is a fairly substantial acre size for our area, was planted before April 22nd, which is really unheard of here. So our growers are very aggressive getting out planting beans early, and we'll see if that pays off. So again, thank you for letting us participate in the crop tour, and I believe Don King is next and is gonna finish this up.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm here to give the final results for the tour, and again, just kind of a recap: 36 counties, 255 townships, 510 fields. So our results are: our northwest quadrant yield on corn was 207 bushel, soybeans 50 bushel. Our great partners at NuWay, corn bushels at 188, soybeans at 44. Our northeast quadrant, corn at 200, soybeans at 55. Our southeast quadrant, corn at 226, soybeans at 55. And our southwest quadrant, corn at 216, soybeans at 61. It gives the second annual Landus Crop Tour total results for our trade area: corn at 206, soybeans at 55. All in all, with the weather we've had a little bit of everything this year. We can call it a ho-hum, middle of the road crop, but there's been a lot of things here in the state of Iowa and in the U.S., especially on the west of the Mississippi, that's gave us a lot of heartburn and turmoil. But in closing, I want to talk about when we look at our final results on August 12th, the U.S. government came out with the U.S. at 193 on corn, soybeans at 58, and the 2020 USDA final numbers were 178 and 53. With that, again, a lot of things yet to be determined, a lot of things that that could be done out here, but all in all, we got some potential. The late rains have helped, and we look forward for a safe harvest and bringing in all we can. In closing, I want to thank all the staff at Landus and NuWay that were involved. We had a lot of dedicated people that went out, worked in the fields, and gave us these great numbers. I especially want to call out Stacy and Reese for their running the program for us and leading us through these to get these things out to our growers and our customers and trade partners. And ending with anything that we can do to help you, please reach out to your account manager or our growth center on anything on harvest hours, grain contracts, grow rewards. And our growth center number is 515-800-GROW. We got some great people, talented people in that staff that are just waiting to help you with anything that we can do. More importantly, everyone have a safe harvest. It's probably going to be a long one, especially if you got some down crops. But in all, let's be safe. Let's have a good harvest. And we look forward to bringing this back to you for our third annual next year at this time. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, everyone who presented today. We can hang on here just a couple minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat. Otherwise, that is everything for today. Thank you so much. We had one question submitted. Are the slides going to be available from this talk? Yes, we will be sending out the recorded presentation to all those who attended. You will get that via email, and then it will also be posted on our social media channels and website here by tomorrow. All right, if there are no other questions, we will go ahead and end our webinar. Thank you all so much for joining, and have a great day.